a village in the city of Phoenix here in Arizona. And we welcome you. Just to give you a quick lowdown on I am Jeff Sprout. I'm the superintendent of Laveen School District. I'm trying to work through everything I'm supposed to say here. Laveen is made up of 9 pre-K through 8th grade schools. And we have a very diverse community, probably the most diverse school district in Arizona. All levels of income in general, though, all Title I schools. 8 out of 9 Title I schools. We just have a wonderful level of community support that starts with our governing board, which you see their seats behind us. And so it is a great place to be. I just want to attest to the impact that EM2 is having on our school district. We adopted this curriculum last year, and I just finished visiting every classroom in our school district a couple days ago. And I made a special effort to get into our EM2 classrooms. And I am seeing by far the best instruction I have ever seen in math across the board in my time in the district as superintendent. The impact has been absolutely amazing, and we are so thankful for what we see happening in our classrooms. So I would like to publicly say thank you to all those who have brought about this curriculum, that are here today from great minds. I would really also like to thank all of our school leadership, instructional leadership teams. That includes our principals, our APs, our instructional coaches, our teacher leaders that have made this an incredible rollout. We still got a lot to learn. We're working on pacing. We're working on certain aspects of our lessons, but overall it's been incredible. So again, welcome to this great school district. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Shadell.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Well, good morning, y'all. I'm excited to spend some time in Arizona. I think my temperature difference was like 70 degrees from when I left to when I entered. It was a bit of a shock. As Jeff said, I'm Stephen Shadell. I am the Chief Knowledge Officer at Great Minds. I have spent about 17, 18 years in school leadership roles. Started as a math teacher, high school, middle school, then a high school math director, then naturally the township's math director, and then the township's curriculum director, and had all those fun experiences. But I've always had a deep passion for mathematics instruction. And I think it's because of the individuals I intersected with as a student. And I dream of a time where, hopefully 15, 20 years from now, when I ride into the sunset and take care of my grandbabies at some point, that kids and teachers leave schools feeling that joy in mathematics. If we were to interview 10 people today, go to a mall and interview 10 people and ask them their thoughts on mathematics, we could probably predict what those responses would be. And I dream of a world where that would be flipped, right? Where we'd have that same interview and 9 out of 10 people would tell us how much joy they had experiencing it. And we'd have a similar experience for teachers. And I recently left working with the school system, and I can truly tell you, I know Laveen is living this now. Some of the things we'll talk about today are the key components into shifting a math classroom from being a bit passive to a joy-filled classroom. And that's where we hope every child intersects with mathematics. So I just wanted to point out where we're headed and our goals for today. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about universal design for learning around math. I know there's a lot of literature and there's a lot of work being done for universal design in all content areas, but today we're going to focus on math and why it's so essential to utilize UDL principles in mathematics. We're going to talk about instructional design, and this is the most important piece, right? Universal design for learning isn't a scaffold you give to a teacher. It isn't something that I bring in a worksheet. It is literally the craft of a lesson. So how do we think about the craft of a lesson? How do we build a lesson for students where we're thinking about the principles of UDL front and center and not as an afterthought, if you will? And then lastly, we'll close with some Q&A and some debrief conversations. Our driving passion, and I know this is not going to be news to many in the room, we believe that every child is capable of greatness in mathematics. And we aren't willing to pivot. We aren't willing to say 99% of kids. I will never sit down with a family and say, everyone but your child has great access in mathematics. So we're going to talk about three things today. And I think these three things are ultra important today. First and foremost is engagement. And this is not a passive experience in mathematics, like I mentioned earlier. Deep, deep engagement with the curriculum, deep, deep engagement with my conversations with peers, and deep engagement through my connections of mathematics to the world. Lastly, and this can never be more important than today, how do we make sure that we provide resources that are teachable? I know my wife tells me frequently that people in her school are being pulled to sub. She rarely has planned periods. I know that's the norm now. So how do we set up a school system, a program in your system to ensure every teacher knows how to best engage students in a 15, 20-minute planned period? Maybe, right? Maybe they get that. So we'll talk about that too. And lastly is accessibility. How do we ensure that we aren't providing even more barriers to entry in mathematics? I would love to know from you, just a quick fist to three, if you, in 30 seconds, I'll say hold a number up. If you hold up a 3, that'd be somebody that's like, I'm very, very familiar with UDL. I use these principles with teachers. A 2 would be, I'm growing in my knowledge, but I have a decent understanding. And a 1 would be, my familiarity with UDL is starting to blossom, but I'm kind of new. So if you just take 10 seconds on your own, and I'll ask you to hold up a 1, 2, or 3, just to help me do a quick formative assessment on where we head next. All right, if you hold up those numbers. Great. It's kind of exactly what I expected. Thank you. Average of like 2.3. All right. When I was in college, this is a wild story. When I was in college, I had 3 roommates that were all architecture majors. And I remember sitting in a class my sophomore year as a math major. I remember sitting in my class my sophomore year with the other like 10 math majors. And we all had this great conversation about how we were all roomed with the architect students. And we all made this connection around how the heck are all of us in rooms with 3 architecture students. We later learned that it's really hard for some to pass calculus, so they throw a math major into the room. And I am forever indebted to them because I know some wild things about architecture. One great story is I came back and my roommates are making like these small designs. Makes me think of museum Made for Ants reference. What movie is that from? Zoolander, yeah. But they had cut these pieces of cardboard, if you will. Can you imagine that? And they're making like these small versions of. And I saved up like $90 to buy this IKEA coffee table. I was so proud of myself. And as they're cutting, they're not using a mat, and my coffee table has like 3,000 scars on it. And so I lived through this. But I remember asking them some bizarre questions, because I would look at these designs and be like, why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way? And they would go down a list of all of the factors that they had to think about when they were building whatever they were building. I remember one time it was my friend was building a veterinarian office in my room. And the things that an architect thinks about to ensure that wheelchairs can get in buildings, to ensure there's access in hallways, right? Just go down the list. There's things I don't even probably know today, but just a few of things that would come up. And I'd be like, oh yeah, that's why the front doesn't look as beautiful as I thought it would, because yes, you need to have accessible ramps, and we see this all the time, right? Whether it's automatic doors, or you've seen these, right, with curbs where it's a gentle, gradual. I live right by a train stop, and this freezes really quickly. And so I'm usually like out there with my daughter telling people to slow down at those because they get really slippery. You don't deal with that here. But also, if I have a stroller, right, that's really difficult for me. And so I have to take into consideration all these factors. Similar with closed captioning, right? I have some individuals in my family that have some hearing loss. This is a great tool. It's something that I appreciate too now, right? We have to take the same approach when we develop curriculum. And we have to take the same approach when we enter classrooms as the instructional expert, whether you're a teacher, a coach, or administrator. Our design, and if you've seen Eureka Math Squared, I hope you've seen this, is rooted in the principles of universal design for learning, just like the architect is thinking about those things before the building's ever built. And what's so fascinating about the way we've approached this, and we'll look at some components today, is universal design for learning has incredible impact on all learners. And truly, I've seen in classrooms, teachers fully understand for the first time how I remove as many barriers to entry as possible so that all children see themselves as mathematicians. We've all been in a classroom where one child in a group is doing the thinking and everyone else is writing down whatever's happening in that situation. We've all been in the classroom, I'm guilty of it too, where we have had a conversation with 3 kids in the classroom, whole group, and those same kids are the only kids participating. How do we get to a world that is a beautiful, beautiful world in mathematics where everyone's thinking and not just some? On your tables there is a upside down piece of paper. If you could grab one for yourself, minimally. And we're going to do a fun math activity to start our day together. Quick review for those of you who have not intersected with the coordinate plane in a while. Our y-axis here is labeled from 0 to 20, and this is representing your personal joy in mathematics. So think about in your life, a 0 would be my relationship with mathematics was non-existent or truly an awful experience. A 20 would be, I want to get up to the whiteboard and take over for the teacher. I love this so much. On the x-axis is your age from birth, 0, through about mid-college, if you will. I have had some colleagues in a couple other sessions when I've used this activity extend it to like teaching. If you feel free, if you have enough time to do that, you can. But for our purpose today, age goes from birth to about age 20. And so on your own, you can use any representation you like. But what I'm going to ask you to do in the next 3-4 minutes is to graph your journey, your personal journey of mathematics from when you were an early child into college years. And if you want to extend it, you can. I'm not going to tell you how to graph it. You can use you can use a line plot, you can use a dot plot, you can use a histogram. Sky's the limit, but I'm going to turn you loose for 3 to 4 minutes to just chart off what is your personal journey in mathematics. I love seeing all these different representations. I see lines, I see dot plots, I see lots of great math going on. One-minute warning. Looks like we're getting close here. I've got one more piece of this task to share. It's this very simple piece. If you would just reflect on what you just drew on your graph, and there may be some highs, we call that a relative max, and some lows, a relative min is what we'd call that in mathematics. Could you just draw an arrow to some of those key experiences that may have contributed to a high, a low, and just briefly describe in a quick phrase what was happening at that time? We're gonna talk with someone in just a minute, and I want to make sure you're prepared for that conversation. Feel free to also just point out anything, whether it's a journey where you're going steadily up or down. You can put anything here based on that story. We have another 30 seconds. All right. If you would write your last words. Many of you spent some time in the car. We had some great food. We've been sitting for a while. So in about 20 seconds, I'm going to ask you to get up and find a friend. A new friend would be amazing. Share your name, and then whatever you'd feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing anything, that's fine too. But I would love for you to just share with a new friend after you get up and move around a bit. What about your story stood out to you? Maybe focus on like the highest and lowest points, or anything you want to share or feel comfortable sharing. So I'm going to give us 3 minutes. We're going to get up. We're going to find a new friend. We're going to get into partners. And when you hear the music close, we'll head back to our seats.
I cannot understand integers in my...
And then if I add more years to adult life.
Everything good?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I guess that's where here I loved it because then I finally learned how to teach integers.
She had fun.
My high is like 3rd grade multiplication.
Yes.
Lisa Bernstein.
Yes, it's been so long.
I know, ICTM. I've been up here for 5 years now.
No way.
But yeah.
How wild is that?
What's that?
I can't believe it. I saw you and I was like, I can't believe that. And I was like, I just could not figure out why you would be here. And now I know.
ICTM, like MNC.
Yes. Yes.
John Benson.
Yes.
Greg Klein.
Yep.
All of our
Oh, the whole math group. Yeah. Yeah.
I wrote with Everyday Math in the University of Chicago.
What was that?
I said I wrote.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's wild.
And I love this.
Good.
Like I was on the adoption committee, and I'm like, I see.
Are you, where are you at now? What school?
I'm at Paseo Point.
Cool.
Dual language.
Nice.
Yeah. So this is like I started.
That's amazing.
But yeah.
That's so funny. It was great to see you. Yeah. All right. 30-second warning. 10 seconds. Give your last thought, if you would, and then head back to your seats. Well, first I just want to thank you all for taking a leap of faith with maybe somebody you've never met before. I was walking around and just heard some wonderful, wonderful things. I've been able to do this activity all around the country, and the most fascinating thing is that the conversations in rooms really don't change, which probably isn't news to anybody in this room, but we're all nationally working on the same thing, right? And that's increasing joy and impact in our classrooms. I would love to ask 2 questions. Question 1 would be the high highs, those high points. Would anybody be willing to share, take a leap of faith on something that contributed to that high? Yes.
I think it was, for me, it was the teacher. It was really about validating what we were coming to the classroom knowing, and then really extending that. I think making math very authentic was a high for me.
Yeah, anyone else share something similar? Yeah. Anything else in the high category? Yes.
It was learning how to do the math.
And did you go deeper into the how to do? Like what parts of the how were important to you?
For me, it actually relates back to my low.
Okay.
Because my low was learning integers as a child, and I, for the life of me, I didn't know
Sure.
how to do integers. That was something that really stuck with me, and then I felt my teaching, I didn't have effective teaching. That's what strived me to become a math teacher.
Yeah.
And that's what led to my high when I realized how to do integers and made that connection, and it was like, I love math! That's why.
So there was something around understanding that was allowing you to intersect. Okay. Thank you. Any last thoughts? Yes. Thank you.
Selena, was it? She shared a really interesting takeaway that I identified with as well, which was that we are both English as a second language
Sure.
learners, and so math was a universal language
Huh.
and felt successful with numbers and as
Yeah.
opposed to like writing or reading. So I identified with that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you both. Let's turn this on its head. I don't know if anybody had low experiences. Anybody willing to take a leap of faith there? Is there anything that you noticed? Whether something you heard or something that you personally, yes?
So my low was in college, and it was similar to my group. And because I took advanced courses in junior high and high school, then getting to college and not having advanced courses because I was doing like the teacher prep classes for mathematics, I didn't feel like I was continually getting challenged or deepening my understanding. It was just more of the intro of how to teach math to students, and so I lost interest.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, thanks.
I'll share. So I really always enjoyed math and ELA as a kid. And I was always in gifted classes and, straight A's and B's, honor roll kid. And then I went to a really hard school in Chicago where my math scores weren't high enough. So I got my first C and D ever in my life, and I cried a lot. And then once I got my confidence back in college, feel free to judge me, I failed finite math because I tried to do it online 15 years ago, and it didn't work out so well. So those 2 points always resonate with me, but I appreciate it because it wasn't until I used to be a former ELA teacher. It was when I went into administration and started teaching SAT and ACT prep courses, and that's when I found love for math again. So it's been a lot of.
Okay. Anybody resonate with the, can I say roller coaster? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other thoughts in this? Any highlights, things you heard, or yes? Thank you.
I had 2 very specific valleys that I remember, and both were associated with teachers who didn't welcome my neurodivergent brain. And it wasn't until I was in my college math courses and then later in mathematical practices training where that was valued, thinking differently, or at least worth exploring, that it helped restore my joy.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Any last thoughts? Okay, this is the most important piece of this activity. And that is for you to not write anything, but just look back at what you drew. And I would love for you to think about your classroom, your system, your building. Would students in your system, your classroom, your building have a similar chart? A different chart? The same? Just take a moment to marinate on that. We're going to come back to this at the very end. We're going to talk through some components. So if you wouldn't mind just tucking this away, not putting it in a bag, but we'll debrief with this activity. But I want to thank you all. That was awesome, and it's fascinating, like I said, and I'm sure you can imagine. Teachers are really impactful. That is something that comes up. It came up today again in that high category. I'm sure if I had you draw your teacher journey, pass out a new chart. Some of you may look like I would, where it would be kind of rough at first. I was still figuring out I knew math. I love math. I was still figuring out the culture piece, right? I love math. I had a co-teacher at the time, special education co-teacher. That came up today, right? And I was figuring that out, right? There's a lot of components that go into both the crafting of a math lesson, but also the articulation of that lesson. And so we're going to talk about three things, and for those of you who are deep in the UDL world, you've seen this before. We're going to focus deeply on math, though. So when we think about the effective network, this is something we spent so much time, and if you've been in a Eureka Math Squared classroom, you've seen this. How many times have we done day after day of lessons? There's no hook, if you will, in our math instruction. I then go to a science class and I'm engineering, and I'm making a direct comparison to those two very different experiences. We're essentially telling a child at times to be a passive learner in math, an active learner in science, in applied math. Then we have to sustain that effort over time, right? So we're going to talk today about how do we hook kids? How do we activate the effective network through engagement? The second thing is the recognition network. And this for us is so important. The way I perceive mathematics, if we all entered like a freshman year in college abstract algebra course, oh my goodness, would we come in with perceptions about mathematics when we all have teacher backgrounds. But language and symbols are also as important. I could do a training on just words that mean something different in math than they do in the real world. This is not just a vocabulary issue for mathematics. These are very abstract words that we have to have meaning for. A perfect example, and you see this in our curriculum, we eliminated the word improper from improper fractions because that has two very different meanings. That's something that when I first started teaching Eureka Math, I was like, what am I doing here? I used the word improper my whole life. But we are trying to eliminate all of those words that are unnecessary. There are some definitions that are truly necessary in mathematics. But there are some words that are unnecessary, that actually could be a bit misleading, that we have to think about and we have to train ourselves on. And lastly, our strategic network. We're gonna do a lot of up and downs today. We're gonna do a lot of discussion. We all know that we've got about 10 to 12 minutes of seat time, even as adults. And so we've got to get up and moving. When we think about curriculum, I would encourage this, the way we think about it, I would encourage every teacher to think about it. If we're not doing something different every 10 to 12 minutes, we are losing steam, if you will. We're losing the ability to engage at a deep level. And so I'm going to try that today. We'll see if I can hit that. But I know when I was leading in Eureka Math Squared School District, we gave teachers a 10-minute lesson plan at the beginning of the year because of that real important piece of, we could easily sit and get for 25 minutes. I'm going to skip here as I'm going a little slow. But I want you to think about three things as we dive into the math piece. One would be architecture is important. It's as important to architect a math lesson as it is a building. Second, we have to activate all three very important networks of the brain. And we do that through the categories we just described. And that's what we're going to hit on next. On this slide, I have a lesson plan. Have any of you experienced this as a student, as your typical math day and a quiz on Friday? I come in, I do a worksheet. We go over our homework. The same two kids might have questions on homework. We do guided notes. I fill in the blank. I mean, 15 years from now, there's going to be tons of jobs, right, that you just fill in the blank and move on with life. We do a worksheet together. That's fun. And memorize this by Friday, okay? I want you to dream of a world where the heart of the lesson is deeply embedded with the world. I want you to dream of a world where when we learn about key algebraic concepts, we also highlight the history for where that came. I was actually in a school in Arizona probably 2 years ago where one of the math paths were about Mayan history, and I saw 3-4 kids' eyes just light up. They had no idea. I imagine a world where we're truly focused on engagement. We are removing obstacles. We are engaging every child at a deep level. And we all know when our kids love what they're doing, I love what they're doing as the teacher. So let's talk about activating prior knowledge. That's our first piece here. There are so many gaps I come in with in a math lesson, right? Could be vocab, could be just skill. Might be a skill I'm growing in and we've moved on as a class, so I'm trying to remedy that. Could just be the content, right? If I threw up a word problem about football, some of us, our eyes would light up, and some of us would be like, can you just change that to something else? So we've got to be prepared for all of those components. I'm going to play a video for you. It has some sound, but it's not going to help at all. But I'm going to play this video. I want you to just watch the video. And I want you to think about, this is about proportional reasoning. I want you to think about what this would look like on pencil and paper instead. Okay? So we'll watch a video. I'll probably play it twice. I'm going to play the video again here. And this time I want you to think about one thing you notice or wonder while you watch it. All right, we're going to get up again. I would love for this side of the room, we're going to make new friends, to find another friend on this side of the room that's not sitting next to you. The middle, similarly. And then this side of the room, find a new friend, but in this grouping, if you will. And we're just going to talk through what's one thing you notice or wonder based on what you just saw. Let's get up, find a new friend, and we'll take about 90 seconds. About 20 seconds remaining. All right. If you'd pause your amazing conversations before we sit down, anybody willing to share something they noticed or wondered before we sit down? Anybody willing to share something they noticed or wondered? Yes, thank you.
I noticed that the only language that you needed to have to engage with that video was the word meters. So you weren't worried about listening comprehension, you weren't worried about the sound, the background, there being a voiceover with it. The only word that was present was the word meters. So as a multilingual student, I can access the video, even if the word meters, even if I don't know the word meters,
Sure.
I can have a common language experience with others.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I asked you the first time to think about this on paper. I could easily write this problem on paper, right? For the first so many meters, it took this long. I mean, come on, like that would be tough for us to engage with, right? Any other thoughts, notice, or wonderings? Yes, thank you.
I was telling Lucia how I noticed the second time around, so I was glad you played the video again, how the seconds changed, and I was trying to keep track. So it seemed like she lost momentum because it took her longer to get from B to C, and she had gained momentum because from C to D, where it stopped was less time.
Yeah, so, and if we had more time, I would start honing that, right? We are now talking about this not being a constant rate. And I mean, we just watched a 16-second video, right? Like and so this is a way for us to, yes, hook. You know, the kids are going to say, she's doing handstands, right? Like that will be most of the notice and wonderings. But I'm going to have the conversation here eventually of, yeah, maybe she wasn't going at a constant rate from the start to finish. How would we figure out the rate at different points? And then what would we start doing, right? And we hone that by carefully scaffolding for the teacher that next experience. Because we can now go to a tabular or graphical approach, right? And this would be, I mean, so much more threatening if I just had a worksheet that had that on there. But if you thank your friends, head back to your seats. I appreciate the great conversations. I know in our room today we have a lot of amazing leaders in this room, teacher leaders, instructional coaches. So we're going to zoom out a bit here, and we're going to think outside of just the classroom or grade level and more to the grade band level. I want you to look at this really important topic on the slide. This, if you've ever taught third grade, I mean, I was an instructional coach for third grade for a while, and I fell on my face teaching this concept. Comparing fractions. Holy cow. You're going to tell me that some fraction with a denominator of 6 is less than something with a denominator of 3? That makes no sense, right? And without significant concrete understanding, where do you even begin? Yeah, I guess you could go to number lines, but this is going to be one of the most difficult concepts a child has experienced. What was funny, a few weeks ago, I did the same activity we started with. Someone literally called out this experience as a low, right? Because this is such an abstract topic. I'm going to show second grade and first grade. And as I show them, I'm going to show them slowly. In third grade here, we've got our models and our number lines. I want you to see what's happening in second and first grade. And just think through the vertical articulation, if you will, as you're looking at it, okay? So we're going in reverse. I lied. We're going for first grade. So take a look at first grade here. Just think about what's happening in this classroom. I'm not going to give you any background. With your table, can you have a quick conversation around, again, the vertical articulation? What's happening from first grade to second grade to third grade? So turn and talk if you would. What's happening here? All right, I'm going to ask you to pause there. When we activate prior knowledge, we just saw how, through video, we can engage in a context. But also, what I hear frequently, and I've lived with too in the classroom, is I don't necessarily know what happened in the previous grade. And so I'm kind of pulling from things and using some of my time in the classroom, right? So anybody willing to take a leap of faith here? From first to second grade, does anyone want to share what they talked about the slight difference in complexity? Yes, thank you.
We talked about first grade, like parts of a whole, but they're probably using manipulatives, and we said second grade you could be done with folding paper.
Yeah, that's a great point. Those easily could be pieces of paper, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. And when I think about first grade, we tend to, I think, underplay their knowledge of fractions. Nobody knows how to share equal parts more than a first grader. And mine at home, I mean, every day tells me you get what you get and you don't get upset. And I'm looking at those perfect equal parts, right? Nobody could ever tell me that first graders can't share and partition. And then in second grade, we don't have a cookie anymore. But yes, I could use a concrete manipulative like a piece of paper. Now think about a classroom. We have to activate math background knowledge to be successful. As a teacher, my job is so much easier in third grade. When, if I look at grade 2, model 3, that looks very similar to grade 3. That's a great starting point. We know, and you all in this room know, that I barely have time to plan for my grade level. How the heck am I supposed to know what's happening in previous grade levels? That's why we take the time in Teachers Editions to coach teachers at the module at the very beginning on what they've learned in previous grades, and that's up here, right? We have to provide that. I don't have time to study all that. How will we expect a teacher to study all that? So we have to be clear in grade 2 and grade 3 what's happening, and also prepare that third grade teacher to know what's happening in 4th and 5th grade. How will these models, how will these fraction number lines be utilized in the grades to come? Lastly, for activating prior knowledge, and we'll brush over this quickly, we started talking about constant rate. Remember that video with the handstands? When we think about how we prepare for that and activating prior knowledge, we have to be purposeful. And when we think about fluency, every day has purposeful fluency that is uniquely tailored to that student population. I look at fluency as being the stretching before I work out, right? We would never, at our age, just go, I hope, go for a run. We're going to do some stretching, we're going to get ready, so that when I have that conversation as a class, we watch that amazing video, we've prepped some of those skills. We've talked about constant rate of change. We've brought back our tabular approach. I might, as a teacher, even bring back a graphical approach if I know that my students have a gap there. But for us, everything we do is so purposeful. When I grew up, the school that was the best at football in my community was the smallest school by far. Wasn't even close. And I remember wondering as a child why that was the case. How does the school that has half the size of another school in the township, how do they beat them every single year? And later, as an adult reflecting on that, and I was a coach as well at the high school, I quickly realized that the reason they were so good is that every parent, every coach, every teacher, every administrator knew the program. And they ran it, and they ran it every year. And we have to do that in math. We do not have time to have scattered approaches. We do not have time to have the math interventionists and special education teachers wondering what the heck I do here. Every single adult needs to know where to drive. They need to understand what my role is at the 30 minutes for math intervention, my 70 minutes with kids in the math block. What is the expectation? How do I go there? How do I get them to deep understanding? It's through every single thing being purposeful. We deeply believe in distributed practice. We believe that when you see something today, and you see it in 3 days, and you see it in 7 days, and you see it in a month and 3 months, that's how things stick, right? I remember teaching a class, my first year teaching, and coming back to it my third year teaching, and I had to relearn it all. And I am a math certified teacher, but yet we expect our students to master things for 360 days without coming back to it. So when we think about fluency, we have to keep that in mind. The second piece is multiple points of entry, and you all have lived this. Too many times, I look at a problem, I may not understand the context or the mathematics that are being addressed, and my only tool is to just shut down because I don't know where to turn. Right? I could bring us all an example where we would all just look at it and be like, yeah, I haven't done this in 20 years. What am I going to do here? Me included. So we're going to look at something called counting collections here. And I absolutely love counting collections because it teaches at an early age and then progresses. It teaches students how to think critically about why we make tens, why we make equal groups, why it's important, like when I look at that burrito tray back there, why they set it up so they know how to get 10 burritos out to catering, right? We purposely put things in groups because it's easy to count those groups. In the US, we have some other bizarre things around measurement and stuff that I won't get into today, but all in all, we typically put things in 5s and 10s, right? Too fast. I'm going to show you 2 slides. These slides are going to be so fast, okay? I'm going to flash something for about 4 seconds, and then I'm going to ask you a question. You ready? Turn to a partner and tell them how many yellow cubes you saw and how you saw them. Real quick, how many do you think and why?
Yes. Same answer. More than 3, less than 2.
Anybody feel very confident with their guess? Okay, round 2. I'm going to show you a new slide. I'm going to go back to this one and hold it. I'm going to show you a new slide, and then you're going to get 4 seconds as well. You ready? Here we go. How many were there, and how did you see it? Turn to a friend and have a quick conversation. Anybody feeling more confident about the second green and anybody like so confident you're like I know this answer. I bet a burrito on it. Why was that so much easier for you? It was organized. It was organized in 10s, right? The colors were helpful for me. Anyone else find that helpful? Yeah. There are too many times in classrooms where we don't give the why behind things we do. But everyone would agree after this conversation in this activity that making 10s is a useful thing to do. So when we engage kids in counting collections, we engage them in things they do all of the time. If we had a group of K3 students in here and we brought counters out or board games, they would do tons of counting. And we can strategize that in a way through counting collections where we, yes, are engaging kids at a deep level, but also bringing forward the rules the ideas that I'm going to label as a teacher later on, the definitions in their words that I'm going to hone. I'm going to talk about making a 10 or making multiple 10s, and I have this activity to draw upon. Another piece for multiple entry points is, this problem is so bizarre. I left out most of it because I didn't even want to put it on the slide. It's about like a coin counting machine. Can you imagine? I haven't seen a coin counting machine in years. And I don't know if our students have, but imagine what the problem looked like, and then it gave 4 options here: machine A, machine B, machine C, machine D, right? I want to show you how this problem, and problems like this do appear on state assessments, how this could look a little different. I'm going to pause it there. You get the idea. But imagine if I had half of you pencil and paper with just a worksheet that had this problem on it, and half of you watching this video, asking questions, honing thinking, and then having kids dive into it. When we think about digital, this is the biggest piece of the puzzle our team wrestles with. We believe that digital should only be used when it enhances engagement and discussion in the classroom. We aren't a believer in digital driving learning. We think that the educator and the relationship they have with their students is what drives incredible math learning. So when we think about digital interactives, I feel that that is a really helpful way to use a digital interactive for a context that could be really difficult to understand. We also use digital interactives when it makes sense. It speeds things up so I can have an awesome conversation. So some of our geometric visualizations allow for kids to see vertical angles in action and then have a conversation. It allows them to see constructions in middle school and then have a conversation. We could do constructions by hand, and we do them, but once I have the understanding of a construction of a geometric concept on paper, I could just fly through and go right to a conversation then digitally. So we think about multiple points of entry. Not only do we think about how interactives can help all kids engage, but how do I get all kids to be part of a facilitated discussion in my classroom? And the way I do that is by allowing them to put it in their own language. So I don't show a video and then tell them the answer. I show a digital interactive. Our curriculum allows for teachers to have multiple questions to ask, and then the majority of our kids are going to have great ideas. 3. Clear and concise student-facing language. And for us, this is just so important. It's so important today. It's always been important. But we want students to experience math, and we know language and reading ability can play a factor in that not happening. So let's talk about readability. On the screen, there's a student-facing worksheet. If you take a second on your own to just observe and tell that table partner just 1 or 2 things you notice about this worksheet compared to the typical worksheet. So spend about 30 seconds on your own. And then with a friend at your table, somebody around you, compare and contrast. What's one thing you notice, one thing you wonder about this worksheet compared to worksheets of old?
Just look at the
Anybody willing to share something that they noticed, something they wondered as they compared? Anything different you see? Yeah.
I noticed it's a lot more visuals. So when it says circle, there's a circle, number bonds, it shows the picture of the number bonds. And I know using it with students in the past has been really good for special ed students because they have those visuals to rely on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Any other components?
I just want to add on to that, because it's very minimal in a sense, like the readability is, anyone has an entry point to attack this, but we are seeing it a bigger scheme in our self-contained rooms and our resource classrooms that are actually on grade level, still sticking to the curriculum and not having to pull outside resources.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you. We also know a lot about reading today, right? We know a lot about, especially in K2, where students should be in that spectrum. But frequently in math, we don't adhere to those guidelines, and we provide a worksheet. We provide a student book that has a different view towards reading skills, essentially. So not only, and thank you all for pointing out those cues within the curriculum, we have to build in our K2 classrooms our content for students with the best with the understanding of the best practices in reading as well. Otherwise, this becomes one of the greatest barriers. I've been to many places where there are 6 kids that can't read it, so then someone takes over, an adult takes over, right? Reads it to the kids, helps them with the first few problems we've now taken away from the children in the classroom, and we have said that this adult is now the expert again, and we'll showcase to you how to pull this off. But our goal with language is to, yes, have everyone engage in mathematics, but not add to barriers of entry into our problems. I want to point this is going to be very threatening to some if you haven't seen this in a while. I mean, in middle school, and I know many of you are in pre-K through 8 buildings, language gets so outrageous at times. It gets so abstract. And so we've got to help teachers, especially if they're new to the profession, new to the grade, new to the content area, just calling out exactly what students need to be able to do and putting that in a visual. If I, as a student, don't have that visual, have fun trying to understand what order of magnitude means, a key term of the grade, and first factor. So not having an image, not having something to draw upon contributes to this issue of what do these abstract words mean, and then throw on top of that what we talked about earlier, some of these words actually mean something else in the world, and I'm wrestling with all of those components. So when we think about multilingual supports, we are thinking about language objectives and language supports that are purposely built in a way that has a concrete component to it, because we never should expect that a child, an adult, any human being can make all of those leaps into the abstract without having that unbelievable concrete experience. All right, number 4. I've tried to model this today, but we've got to provide our strategic active processing time. And this piece in math, sadly, I've always felt we are a few years behind our colleagues in the humanities. We are always thinking about a pacing guide, right? We're always like, how do I finish this? How do I get this lesson done? And we forego the most important piece of any lesson. And that's allowing the kids to think, process, collaborate, speak. In a math class, our belief is that a child should take on the role of a mathematician. In a science class, a child takes on the role of a scientist. From my work with university professors, some of the most brilliant math people are the slowest processors I've ever experienced. For some reason, we have flipped that on its head, and I think it has to do with real factors in schools, right? I don't have as much time typically in math as I do reading. I may not be as comfortable. I don't have the same training, right? We have more reading specialist trained teachers than we do math specialist trained teachers. Some states don't even have a math specialist cert. And so we've got to think about all of those components and understand that kids think at their own speed. I was going to do this activity with you, but I'm running out of time. One thing that we really think about we think about movement and we think about discourse. And so in our curriculum, one of my favorite routines is the take a stand activity. A take a stand activity allows for me to individually think, join a group of like-minded individuals, and then maybe be persuaded to join another group, right? So we're presented with a rich problem. Each corner of the room has different ideas or different solutions. I take my first stab, whether it's a true false or another type of activity, and then I hear out people in my classroom. This is kind of a take on the Socratic seminar in humanities, right? We don't have rich texts to debate, but we do have some really interesting math that we can talk about. This is a problem I just screenshotted. In this problem, I could ask you all to do this. You could probably draw on some prior knowledge and figure it out. But I want you to think about a classroom where instead of a problem like this, there's a video, time to process, time to hear others out, and then yes, holy cow, I'm hopeful that 5, 6x the amount of students that would have originally been engaged would enter into a problem like this. We have to get to this point, right? We have to get out, we have to get to pencil and paper eventually or digitally eventually, but having things to draw on allow me to access. We utilize, and I've utilized this a lot today, think, pair, shares, right? And so that is our quick go-to as one of our routines. But what I want to share today is that we have to provide that processing time. We have to allow our students to think. And we have to encourage our teachers to think about at the end of their lessons, and if you're coaches in the room, I encourage you to do this, what % of the time were your kids doing the thinking and what % of the time were you doing the thinking? We've got to transition that to be more 100% student and more 0% teacher. We have 2 rungs of our UDL principles left. Our second to last is thinking about multiple modes and formats. So I want you to look at these 2 pictures. When we were in school, we were taught an algorithm, right? The researcher Marilyn Burns has this amazing video where she interviews hundreds of kids, hundreds of second graders. She gives them all the same problem, 98 plus 3. What do you think they do? Line them up and add. What does that show us, right? What does that show us when child after child after child is solving 98 plus 3 using the standard algorithm?
They don't understand numbers.
Number sense is not the backbone of their learning experience. In this case, take a look at our first picture. This is all the same problem, shown in 3 different ways. In the bottom picture, sometimes kids catch on to partners of 10 really quickly, right? But sometimes they don't. And it's important for us to understand that concrete representation of mathematics isn't prescribed. We all don't leave concrete understanding at the same time. That doesn't mean we forgo it, and so we build those pictures in on a regular basis. We build in a fluency or an activity to bring the conceptual understanding back. You have to have that embedded for just the average people in the world who just need a little bit more time with something than another topic, right? I'm going to show you 6 images. This is going to zoom out of the grade now. We're going to talk about grade bands here. We're going from kindergarten to 7th grade. And in this district, and for those of you who are in K-8 buildings, this is fun, right? Because you do experience this. Just observe, and I want you to think about something you notice or wonder as you observe. Here's 3rd grade. I'm going to show you the bottom row here in just a second. So with that person, people next to you, what's one thing you noticed or wondered as you observed this progression from kindergarten through 7th grade? We're going to have a quick 30-second conversation. All right, 10 more seconds. Anybody willing to share a notice or a wonder as they observed this progression from kindergarten through 7th grade? I obviously left out a lot, but put some highlights in here. Any noticing or wonderings?
The notice is you built you built that structure of what a number bond is.
Mm-hmm.
You can apply that in no matter what grade you're in. If they understand what a number bond does, you can, from kinder, exposure from kinder all the way to 7th grade.
Thank you. Any other notice or wonders?
We noticed like in kindergarten, it's very like concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there you can build to more complex.
Thank you. I purposely put 3rd and 7th vertically off to the right. Anyone have thoughts on why I might have done that? Look at 3rd and 7th. I wouldn't say that. I'm not sure. I think every building's a little different. But if I Marilyn Burns to some middle school students and gave them variable expressions and had them describe for me what negative 5x actually means, I think I would have some varied responses. But is that much more different? I'm going to make it positive now, positive 5x. Is having 5 x's much more different than the idea of having 5 7s? If I took 7s and just made it a variable s and made it 5s instead of 5 7s, haven't I made that an expression? Yeah. I've been building that understanding through a child's entire life because we're going abstract eventually. That's the study of ratios and functions, is taking everything you've learned and abstracting it. And the last thing we need to do in our systems is pull a new model or pull a new strategy. We need to rely on the beautiful mathematics that they've been learning through their system. Here's another one. We're going to do this one quickly. These are tape diagrams. And just notice the tape diagram evolving. Proportional reasoning in middle school is really hard to understand. And imagine, and I hear this all over the place, we're not going to have time to go into it today, but imagine being this 8th grade teacher who is so excited to engage their children in conceptual understanding. Can you imagine being that 8th grade teacher and your children have never seen a tape diagram? You have fun, right? But imagine being that teacher that you know in your system have been progressing in a way where when you get to systems of equations, which are very, very abstract, some of you even might have stories of you might even remember systems of equations because of how abstract they were. Imagine being able to root yourself in the why conceptually because you've had a vertically aligned process and system. Going back to that football team story. I'm not going to show you another video, but we also have more silent videos. I want to point out this though, and I know everyone wants slides, right? Everyone wants their whatever projector they're using. We have spent so much time, and I would encourage all teachers to think about this. What is the only thing you need on slides, and just putting that on there, right? You could tell me the math problem by looking at this slide, couldn't you? It's how many kids need to be added to go on the bus. That's all we need. I just need to draw kids to that. I don't need 7,000 other things on this slide. We want the math to happen on the slide and not other things. So when you go through our slides and you're like, why is there not more on there? That's why. Because I want every child to look at this. I don't need to know anything about the English language to pull this off. Lastly, strategic review. We all, and I talked about this earlier, we've all been in a place, whether it's something we've learned, a new skill, athletically, we signed up for a 5K, we've got to go back and practice. We've got to go back and stretch. This has to be so purposeful in our systems. We can't put ourselves in a position where we randomly pick things to put into our lesson. We need to review topics that, yes, are important for the grade, but also important for the future. And when anything goes home, if anyone chooses to send things home, we need guidance for that caregiver. Otherwise, it's the most inequitable experience of that child's day. And so we've got to think about how we provide the timely distributed practice, but also have tools and resources for those supporting the child outside the classroom. That could be a grant-funded tutoring program. Wherever they're going, we want to ensure that the adults that are supporting them, that are doing the best they can for their children, are driving instruction in the same way as the teacher. Because in a lot of systems, a student's doing one lesson in math, they're doing a second lesson with an intervention or special education resource teacher, and a third lesson with a caregiver. And we can barely get one lesson mastered. So we've got to drive everything in the same direction with all the tools and resources we provide. All right, our last piece. I asked you to keep that graph handy. If you'd go back to that graph that we did early on, I want you to dream about your classroom, your system, your grade level, your building. What do you hope your chart would look like for your students, your kids, if you will? And what would it take to get to that place where joy is off the charts from when kids come to you in pre-K or kindergarten and when they exit your system at whatever grade your building exits? And I want to thank you for your time today. I love being here. I love 90 degrees. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.